With the start of the 1940s, India witnessed its biggest mass movement against the British, that was the Quit India movement, which was launched in 1942. At the same time, the world was going through the Second World War between 1939 till 1945. Britain had declared India's participation in this war, which broke out on 1st September 1939. Meanwhile, tensions between the two prominent parties of India at the time, the All India Muslim League and the Indian National Congress, increased over the issue of India's independence and partition. It was a situation of political deadlock. In order to solve this situation, the Congress leader from Madras, Chakravarti Rajagopalachari, proposed a formula which famously came to be known as CR formula. But before going into the nitty-gritties of the formula, let's understand some background of the events that led to the need of such a formula. The situation of political deadlock between these two parties was not always there. As we know, the Indian National Congress was formed in 1885 and the All India Muslim League was formed in 1906. In 1916, the Lucknow Pact was signed between the Indian National Congress and the Muslim League. As we have already studied, in this pact, it was agreed that the Muslim League will support the Indian National Congress's demand for home rule or Swaraj, and Congress in turn will recognize the separate electorate which will create constituencies where only Muslims will contest and vote. They have previously worked together. Then what stopped them from joining hands to fight against the British during the 1940s onwards? Basically, we have also studied in 1937, provincial elections were held in 11 provinces of British India. What happened in this election shook Muslim League. Out of 11 provinces, Congress emerged as a majority party, and the Muslim League was not able to win majority even in Muslim majority provinces. On top of that, the Congress did not need the League as a coalition partner in the Hindu majority provinces. This led to a tussle between the two parties. And finally, in 1940, Muslim League in its Lahore resolution announced for the demand of a separate state. The League was increasingly pushing for the demand of a separate nation, and Congress was against the partitioning of the country. There seemed no solution for this situation, and it became a deadlock between the two political parties. The British, being aware about this, took advantage of this deadlock. They said that the topic of India's freedom will only be considered once these two political parties came up with a settlement. The British government explicitly stated that no political advancement in India will happen until then. A solution was ultimately needed, and that's when Rajaji came up with a formula to settle the conflict between Congress and the Muslim League. So basically, the big question arises, who was Rajaji? Chakravarti Rajagopalachari, informally known as Rajaji, was born in 1878 in a small village called Thorapalli. At that time, the region came under the Madras Presidency. He was a lawyer, writer, and one of the prominent leaders of pre-independent as well as post-independent India. He had played a very significant role in Indian freedom struggle. He joined Congress and participated in the agitations against the Rowlatt Act in 1919, joined the non-cooperation movement, the Vacuum Satyagraha of 1924-25, and the civil disobedience movement that had begun in 1930. He was a follower of Mahatma Gandhi and had earned great respect from Gandhiji and Jawaharlal Nehru. Rajaji was close to Gandhiji. He was described as a keeper of Gandhiji's conscience by Mahatma Gandhi himself. Later, he also became the editor of Gandhiji's newspaper, Young India. Apart from this, Rajaji's daughter had married to Gandhiji's son also. Although Rajaji was an adherent follower of Gandhiji, he never feared expressing his views. He even opposed Gandhiji's Quit India movement as he viewed that the British were going to leave the country eventually. So he was not a part of the Quit India movement. As he did not participate in the Quit India movement and was not arrested with the other Congress leaders, during this time, he was able to conceive a plan that could have put an end to the differences between the two political parties. Let us see what Rajaji had put in his formula. Earlier in 1943, Rajaji began conceiving a proposal to serve as a basis for a settlement between the two parties. He got Gandhiji's approval when he showed him the formula. This became widely known as the Rajajis Formula or CR Formula. It drew attention of both the Indian National Congress and the Muslim League. In April 1944, he communicated this formula to Muhammad Ali Jinnah. This solution was expected to solve the never-ending deadlock between the two political parties. In this formula, Rajaji was ready to accept the demand of the League for a separate country for the first time. Now, even Gandhiji supported this. But why? Turns out, things were not so simple for the Muslim League in the formula. It was a tacit acceptance of Muslim League's demands. That means there were some crucial conditions that the League had to accept if they wanted the creation of Pakistan. These conditions were the main ingredients in the formula. Let's take a look at all these points. The first point of the proposal was that the Muslim League would join hands with the Indian National Congress to demand independence from the British. It was a reinforcement of the everlasting demand by the Congress. The ultimate goal of independence was put first. Rajaji, in his formula, proposed that the Muslim League should cooperate with the Congress in the formation of a provisional interim government at the center until the transitional period ends. And what about the partition? It was made clear by the Muslim League that their main goal is partition. So the next point in Rajaji's formula was that after the war, a commission would be entrusted with the task of demarcating those areas with an absolute majority of Muslims, and a plebiscite to be held in those areas where all the inhabitants, Muslims as well as non-Muslims, would vote on the basis of adult suffrage, whether to form a separate sovereign nation or not. Now, this was something very serious. It meant that the entire population of the Northwest and Northeast India, including the majority Muslims, Hindus, and Sikhs, would vote and decide whether they want a separate nation or not. These regions were Punjab, Sindh, Northwestern Frontier provinces, and Balochistan in the west, and Bengal region in the east. But all of this could happen only when the war is over and full transfer of power is made by the British. Now, here is the next condition in the formula. If partition happens after the said plebiscite, joint agreements were to be made for the safeguarding of defense, communications, and commerce, as well as other essential purposes. Now, you all can understand, this was very strategic. This meant that if two nations emerged, Pakistan and India, both nations would work together in defense establishments such as that of the army and do business with each other. It was clear that this would be a guarantee of a union between the two countries. Rajaji also proposed a condition that the transfer of population would be absolutely on a voluntary basis, meaning that if partition happened, the people will be free to leave or stay in whichever country they are living in. And lastly, the most important condition was that all the given terms would come to fruition only if Britain transfers full powers to India. So basically, independence first, partition later. Now, it was upon both the parties on how they wanted to proceed. Jinnah knew the conditions proposed in the Rajaji Formula could stop the partition from happening. How? Let's see what problems Jinnah had with Rajaji's Formula. The first objection Jinnah had with this formula was the conditional creation of Pakistan. He wanted the Congress to accept the two-nation theory. Pakistan was the League's first priority. The second objection by Jinnah was related to the plebiscite which Rajaji had proposed in his formula. It included people from all religions. Now, although the population of Muslims in the Muslim majority regions was large, there was still a significant proportion of Hindus as well as Sikh population. Jinnah felt that the plebiscites with people other than the Muslims contradicted the basic principle of Muslims' inherent right of self-determination. Moreover, Congress also had a large number of Muslim supporters who rejected the idea of Pakistan. So, there was a chance of losing the plebiscite, and it seemed that the partition wouldn't happen in these circumstances. Jinnah was not ready to take the risk. So, he strongly opposed the idea of including the non-Muslims in the plebiscite. He wanted only Muslims of those regions to vote for a separate nation. Jinnah objected to the key proposals of the formula, so the remaining conditions were also naturally rejected. He was against the idea of a common center and wanted separate dominions to be created before the British left India. He attacked the formula. He felt the formula offered only a maimed, mutilated, and moth-eaten Pakistan. As a result, Rajaji's formula was rejected by the Muslim League. Everything came to a stop again, and the political deadlock continued. The Muslim League stood their position on the creation of a separate Muslim majority country. It wasn't just the Muslim League that had problems with the Rajaji's formula. There was opposition from various other sects and parties of India at that time. The Sikhs considered the formula unfair. Why? If partition would have happened according to this formula, the Sikhs inhabiting the region of Punjab would risk the dangers of partition. Although Sikhs were high in numbers, their population was not in majority in any of the districts of Punjab. The plebiscite proposed by Rajaji could not have given justice to the Sikh community. Hindu leaders were also strongly against any partition. V.D. Savarkar and Shyama Prasad Mukherjee of the Hindu Mahasabha vehemently opposed it and condemned this particular formula. Srinivas Shastri of the National Liberal Federation was also against the CR formula. Lastly, the Indian National Congress was not at all willing to accept Jinnah's demands. They still insisted that the Muslim League join hands with Congress in the freedom struggle and make the country independent first. Rajajis Formula was an effort to solve the political deadlock between the two parties of the time. Even though it was not able to achieve its goal, it was perhaps for the first time that a congressperson acknowledged the idea of a separate nation. The clauses mentioned by Rajaji were outwardly rejected by Jinnah, even when Congress tried to give some concessions to the Muslim League. Imagine, what if Jinnah would have accepted Rajaji's formula? What could have happened and how different things could have been? Although his formula failed to provide a resolution, Chakravarti Rajagopalachari became one of the earliest leaders of INC who saw the partition was inevitable.